Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to First Parish, Unitarian Universalist of Chelmsford. We are a covenantal community gathered for worship, mutual care, faith formation through spiritual learning and ethical discernment, and service to the common good. I'd like to extend a special welcome to anyone visiting us for the first time. We're glad you joined us today. And you can learn more about our congregation and contact us via our website, uuchelmsford.org, or you can email dre@uuchelmsford.org. I'm Reverend Ellen Spiro, and I serve as parish minister. Our worship services are multi-platform, with people participating and attending in the sanctuary and from home. If you're attending from home, Dave Caffeine is our online chat host, and if you wish to join the online chat, you need to join our worship service via our YouTube link option on their website. If you are attending in the sanctuary, be aware that the service is being live streamed and recorded to post on our website later. Our ushers, Edith Murphy and Aggie Brennan, can help you with finding seating that is not within view of the camera if you are uncomfortable. However, you are joining us, though. I'm very glad that you are here from wherever you are, and I invite us to take a moment to say hello to one another and to say hello to people at home. And I know that you can't see all of us, but we are here. I have a couple of brief announcements. We're delighted to have Jeffrey DeGiro Taylor as our guest musician again, subbing for Steve Zaki. Yay, Jeffrey. Jeffrey grew up in this congregation and was a common sight in our youth choirs from carol choir all the way up to the intermediate choir. Jeffrey studied music composition at Ithaca College's School of Music, where he had the opportunity to write pieces while continuing lessons as a pianist. And after graduating a year ago, May 2021, he's gone on to work as a professional soundtrack composer. So Jeffrey, thank you for being here again. We really love your presence and your music. A reminder that today is our annual cleanup at Jolene Dubner Park in Lowell from 11:30 to 3 p.m. Bring a rake, a shovel, energy if you're interested in joining the fun and celebrating our little corner of Earth Day. And finally, our Canvas team is grateful to the 118 pledges we've received from members and friends of First Parish during our stewardship drive this spring. Total pledge dollars received are now a little over 95% of our goal, which is wonderfully amazing, and I thank you. The canvas ends on April 30th, less than a week away. So if you haven't yet pledged, please keep this in mind. Our stewardship drive ends Saturday. Submitting your pledge online couldn't be easier. That said, please do take a moment before submitting your pledge to consider what is for you a fair and generous share. We will have social hour options, one online and one in the vestry after the service. Today's online social hour will be hosted by Elliot Mayer, and the Zoom link will be in the online chat. It can also be found in the announcements emailed out on Friday. But now I'd like to invite us to center ourselves for worship as Jeffrey offers our prelude.
morning. I'm Emma Warla, and with Frances Killam, I helped facilitate OWL during the most recent OWL program. And we wanted to share with you today what it means to both of us. Frances could not be here today, so my mother is going to read her part.
Okay, so this this is what Frances wrote, but it easily could be what I would say as well. There's a lot of similarity here. We came to First Parish 24 years ago looking for a spiritual home where we could raise our children in a community that would provide a moral compass to help guide and support them in their paths to adulthood. Today, I want to recognize OWL, our sex education program. It gave my kids invaluable tools and knowledge about their own bodies, hearts, and minds. They learned not just the details of sexual reproduction, but also the context of respect for self and others, the understanding of gender identity and sexual orientation, the desire for joy, and the need for consent. It really does take a village to raise a child. When I see my kids speak forthrightly from thoughtful conclusions, I know that part of that comes from you, my fellow villagers, for providing the community, the volunteer educators, and the financial support so my children and yours can take part in the admirable religious education program offered here. Thank you, RE Council and RE Faith Formation volunteers for guiding our children in their faith formation journey into adulthood. We are blessed.
I grew up in this church. Looking around this sanctuary, my heart's home. So many happy and fun memories come to mind. A time lapse in this sanctuary would show me singing in the choirs, Jeffrey, performing skits or Christmas pageants during Sunday morning services, reading my credo statement to all of you, and so much more. My friends and I bonded through various religious education programs such as UU School of Rock, COA, and of course, OWL, our whole lives. As an adult, I participated in Sunday morning RE sessions with the children and youth, and I facilitated both OWL and COA. Isn't that a lovely circle? Well, throughout the circle, I realized something pretty important, especially after living through this pandemic. So many things I've learned here really do help center myself out there in the real world. Recently, Jill Hayes, who also grew up here, and I were joking about how church trained us for COVID. Thank you so much. When I breathe in peace. When I breathe out love. We light the chalice in honor of OWL and to remind the youth here in this church that programs like OWL are here for you to feel safe and welcomed, informed, and to provide positive bonding opportunities with each other. And to this congregation who raised me, thank you for providing these opportunities for me. And may the circle continue for us all. I'm also going to read the English version of the covenant, if you'd join me. Something I also helped write. Crazy. We, the members of First Parish, covenant together to sustain and strengthen our beloved community by honoring and celebrating the spirit of life, nurturing all souls in our search for truth in the sacred, caring, and being present to one another, to our joys and sorrows, bearing witness through service to justice and peace, and being good stewards of our congregation, our heritage, our Unitarian Universalist principles, and our earth.
Nosotros, los miembros de la primera parroquia de Chelmsford, convenimos juntos a sostener y fortalecer nuestra amada comunidad, honorando y celebrando el espíritu de la vida, nutriendo todas almas en búsqueda de la verdad y lo sagrado. Cuidar y estar presentes al uno y al otro en nuestras alegrías y tristezas, dar testimonio mediante servicio a la justicia y a la paz, y ser buenos cuidadores de nuestra congregación, nuestra herencia, nuestros principios unitarios universalistas y la tierra. Buenos días, yo soy Dolores, la directora de la formación de fe aquí en First Parish of Chelmsford. Today for our choral ages, I'm going to invite you into a meditation of gratitude and love for the earth. I invite you to close your eyes, and when the bell rings, if only in your mind and heart, whisper the mantra, "Thank you for the gift of life on earth." I hope you can go into this beautiful sacred space that surrounds us. I love you, sun, so brilliant and bright. Thank you for the gift of life on earth. I love you, moon, so serene in the night. Thank you for the gift of life on earth. I love you, field, that provides so many delights. Thank you for the gift of life on earth. I love you, sheep and shepherds and all that tend the earth. Thank you for the gift of life on earth. I love you, wind and rain, powerful and gentle, all the same. Thank you for the gift of life on earth. I love you, tree, home to all creatures, including me. Thank you for the gift of life on this earth. I love you, birds, for lifting my spirits to new heights. Thank you for the gift of life on this earth. I love you, ocean, fish, and mysteries unseen. Thank you for the gift of life on this earth. And I love you, garden, flower, rabbit, and skunk. Thank you for the gift of life on earth. I love you, rock, and bugs, and mud. Thank you for the gift of life on earth. I love you, star, water, fire, and air. Thank you for the gift of life on earth. I love you, earth. Thank you for loving me. Thank you.
So as we pause for a time of gratitude, I invite us to give thanks to the earth and all she offers us. Thank you, Jeffrey. Our historic reading comes from Walden by Henry David Thoreau. Our village life would stagnate if it were not for the unexplored forests and meadows which surround it. We need the tonic of wildness, to wade sometimes in marshes where the bittern and the meadow hen lurk and hear the booming of the snipe, to smell the whispering sedge where only some wilder and more solitary fowl builds her nest and the mink crawls with its belly close to the ground. At the same time that we are earnest to explore and learn all things, we require that all things be mysterious and unexplorable, that land and sea be indefinitely wild, unsurveyed and unfathomed by us, because unfathomable. We can never have enough of nature. We must be refreshed by the sight of the inexhaustible vigor, vast and titanic features, the seacoast with its wrecks, the wilderness with its living and its decaying trees, the thundercloud and the rain which lasts 3 weeks and produces freshets. We need to witness our own limits transgressed and some life pasturing freely where we will never wander. Our modern reading is an untitled poem by Gregory Orr from How Beautiful is the Beloved. This is what was bequeathed to us, this earth, the beloved left and leaving left to us. No other world but this one, willows and the river and the factory with its black smokestacks. No other shore, only this bank on which the living gather. No meaning but what we find here, no purpose but what we make, that and the beloved's clear instructions. Turn me into song, sing me awake. I just think that's a stunning poem. D.B. Johnson is a children's writer and illustrator who created a series of books based on the life of Henry David Thoreau, portraying him as a cuddly, if somewhat curmudgeonly bear who builds a cabin, climbs a mountain, and our family favorite, hikes to Fitchburg. Because, of course, we have a Henry to whom we read all of these stories and who is now a student at Fitchburg State. Coincidence or destiny? Who knows? Anyway, Henry Hikes to Fitchburg. I do love this one. Henry Hikes to Fitchburg tells the story of Thoreau and his friend who decide they want to make their way from Concord to Fitchburg. The friend decides to take a day to earn money so he can take the latest great human industrial invention, the train. Henry decides to walk the 30 miles. While the friend toils to afford to travel the countryside in a car of metal and glass, Henry explores the environment around him, wading through rivers and streams, pressing wildflowers and ferns in his journal, climbing trees, observing eggs in birds' nests, and eating honey and blackberries he finds along the way. The book ends with Henry arriving under the moonlight, his friend awaiting him. The train was faster, his friend tells him. I know, says Henry, holding his pail. I stopped for blackberries. Thoreau was definitely an early environmentalist, believing in living simply and in harmony with the natural world and taking in the tonic of wildness. Thoreau and his circle of fellow Unitarians like Ralph Waldo Emerson and Bronson Alcott, Lydia Marie Child, Margaret Fuller, and Theodore Parker embraced transcendentalism, which preached, among other things, that nature revealed a divine or sacred unity. As Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote in Nature, that behind nature, throughout nature, spirit is present. That spirit is one and not compound. That spirit does not act upon us from without, that is, in space and time, but spiritually through ourselves. Therefore, that spirit, that is, the Supreme Being, does not build up nature around us, but puts it forth through us, as the life of a tree puts forth new branches and leaves through the pore of the old. The Transcendentalists believe that we are not above or separate from nature or from the earth, nor are we between God and nature in a divine hierarchy. We are, in the words of our seventh principle, part of an interdependent and sacred web of all existence. Of course, the Transcendentalists were not the first to embrace this. Indigenous peoples around the world have long known and practiced sacred right relationship with the earth. The animals and plants are our siblings. Take only what you need from the earth and give back what you can. Offer gratitude for the gifts you have received and know them as such. Care for the earth, and it will care for us. That this life and this earth matter is one of the core ideas upon which Unitarian Universalism is built. So climate and environmental justice, care for the earth, is not just a political idea, but a foundational, ethical, and theological value, long and deeply held. Like all living things, human beings must consume to live. We have to eat. We have to build shelter and find ways to heat and cool them. We have to work. We have to organize ourselves to live in communities. We can't all take the time to hike to Fitchburg. Some of us have to take the train. Most of us. After all, as Thoreau and Emerson and the other transcendentalists were wandering around, living in the woods and contemplating nature, their families and friends were back home trying to hold everything together and keep their loved ones alive and out of trouble. Sometimes more successfully, sometimes less successfully. But as Thoreau noted throughout Walden, how we consume, how we live with nature matters. We can consume with awareness, with care, with gratitude rather than hubris. We can live more simply. And I know that you all know that better than I do. But I love this part of our tradition that grows out of awe and wonder as much as concern for the creation. I wonder sometimes if human beings have become a kind of invasive species. The governmental agency NOAA defines invasive species as an organism that causes ecological or economic harm in a new environment where it's not native. While one could argue that human beings are native to all or most parts of the earth, more and more we take over environments in ways that cause ecological and economic harm. We do not treat the environment as creatures native to it, who understand intuitively that our lives depend upon our acting sustainably as if we were part of the cycle of life. Arrogance makes us invasive, as many of our species, especially those who came in and still do to conquer other peoples and their lands, treat the earth as something to be used and abused, a commodity in service to our own comfort and indulgence. So I join with everyone who's worrying about the earth and how human mistreatment and overconsumption is destroying the planet, ever encroaching upon the tonic of wildness. But we are not the only life forms that evolve on this planet. And while many human beings have long considered themselves the pinnacle of creation or even above it, I'm not so sure. I think that nature and the earth are pretty smart and pretty adaptable, and we shouldn't underestimate that. I wonder how long the earth will tolerate our species. Sometimes I think about the pandemic, for example, which put the brakes on human beings pretty hard for a while. Lockdown gave the earth a window for recovery. As the pollution in the air and waters diminished and the greenhouse gas emissions lessened. But lockdown didn't last because we can't live that way. We adapted to the virus, vaccines, masks, medications. But there are enough people among us who think that they know better and that this pandemic is a hoax. And that made it much worse and deadlier than it needed to be, which in turn lessens our capacity as a species to adapt. I think also about the increasing extreme weather, hurricanes and floods and droughts and wildfires and melting glaciers and rising sea levels. These events are pushing human beings out of the places we live where perhaps we should not, like oceanfront properties that are being reclaimed by the sea. And the more we destroy, the less we will have to sustain ourselves in terms of food and clean water. The heartbreaking thing, of course, is that the primary burden of suffering happens first to the most vulnerable among us, people already living on the margins because of poverty and racism and violence and other forms of systemic justice. And of course, the plants and the animals, the ecosystems. At times, I have become disheartened by the level of human selfishness and willful ignorance, the meanness that is rising with the sea levels and the greenhouse gas emissions. Do people really think that just because they have money and power, that they and their descendants will not be impacted by this? That they're untouchable? That the earth is theirs to own and bend to their will? When will they wake up to what the earth is telling us? In an angry and eloquent prayer, George Ella Lyon writes, God signs to us and we cannot read. She shouts, we take cover. She shrugs and trains leave the track. Our schedules, we moan, our loved ones. God is fed up. All the ocean she gave us, all the fields, all the acres of steep, seedful forests, and we did what? Invented the great chain of being and the chainsaw, invented sin. God sees us now gorging ourselves and starving our neighbors, starving ourselves and storing our grain, and she says, I've had it. You cast your trash upon the waters, it's rolling up. You stuck your fine, fine finger into the mystery of life to find death, and you did. You learned how to end the world in nothing flat. Now you come crying to your mommy, send us a miracle, prove that you exist. Look at your hand, I say. Listen to your sacred heart. Do you have to haul the tide in, sweeten the berries on the vine? I set you down, a miracle among miracles. You want more? It's your turn. You show me. I'm not a scientist, an environmentalist, or an activist, an organizer. So I'm not skilled to offer those kind of solutions to awaken the human community to the realities of climate disruption and how to heal them. I'm a pastor, one who holds sacred stories, and a theologian, one who shares sacred stories as a way to help us discern the spiritual and ethical practices for our time. What do these times, what does the earth ask of our souls? A couple years ago, I talked about a book by Francis Weller called The Wild Edge of Sorrow. It's about grief, and he describes 5 gates of grief. Personal loss, grief for the places in us that have not known love, grief for what we expected but did not receive or accomplish, ancestral grief, and grief for the sorrows of the world, or what he calls the animus mundi. He writes, whether or not we consciously recognize it, the daily diminishment of species, habitats, and cultures is noted in our psyches. Much of the grief we carry is not personal, but shared, communal. It's difficult to walk down the street and not feel the collective sorrows of homelessness or the economic insanity revealed in commercialism and consumerism. It takes everything we have to deny the sorrows of the world. At nearly every grief ritual that Weller leads, he says, people share their profound sadness for the earth. They feel what psychologist Chellis Glendenning calls earth grief. She writes, to open our hearts to the sad history of humanity and the devastated state of the earth is the next step in our reclamation of our bodies, the body of our human community, and the body of the earth. You've heard me say it many times. Grief is not about death. It's about love. We grieve because we have lost someone or something we love. And because love doesn't die with that person or that thing, healthy grieving is about finding a new way to be in relationship with them when they are no longer present to us in the ways that we have known. We can grieve in unhealthy ways: denial, anger, hurt, expressed through violence or addiction or other destructive behaviors. Certainly, as we make our way through this particularly traumatic time in history, we see a lot of this kind of grieving. Whole groups of human beings hating and inciting violence and dehumanizing and killing each other and the earth. We can also choose to grieve in ways that are healthy, being truthful, open, vulnerable, taking the time to feel the sorrow and pain that hurt so unbearably at first, and then slowly, because life keeps moving on, gets woven into our living. Healthy grieving connects us to grace, to gratitude, to the beauty and joy that life can offer us, as well as the sadness and the suffering. These build our capacity for generosity, for kindness, for mercy, for forgiveness, all the practices we need to heal ourselves, heal our communities, heal our earth, and to keep us from falling too far into an abyss of despair. Today, a group of First Parishers will gather at Jolene Dubner Park in Lowell for an annual cleanup day. Jolene Dubner was part of this First Parish community, and she loved nature and the outdoors, and the park was created in her honor after her death. This is how grief begets love beyond the pain of loss, turning it into healing, into beauty, into community. This is how we begin to heal the earth and our own souls. Small groups gathered in service to a small corner of the planet, sustaining wildness in the midst of an urban landscape. This is what was bequeathed to us. This earth the beloved left and leaving left to us. No other world but this one. Willows and the river and the factory with its black smokestacks. No other shore, only this bank on which the living gather. No meaning but what we find here no purpose but what we make that and the Beloved's clear instructions. Turn me into song, sing me awake. As we promise in our covenant to be present to one another in our joys and sorrows, I invite us to pause and catch our breaths and open our minds and our hearts and our souls to our source of being. However we know and name that song. In the gathering of this space, across time and space, in body and in spirit, I invite us in the quiet, if you wish to say the name aloud of someone you wish us to hold, or silently to yourself, from home or in the sanctuary. Let us hold that space for a minute together. I offer these words by Nan Merrill as a meditation. As we welcome into our awareness the oneness of humanity, the interbeingness of all, a new creativity will flourish around the world. Justice, harmony, and beauty will prevail in all walks of life. Humankind will interact with one another, with all creation, as an integral whole, with unity blessing diversity. Aligned with our highest essence, the new creation will be birthed on earth. Blessed are you who unite in this great work. Holding the names spoken and unspoken, in memory, in joy and sorrow, and in hope. Amen, and blessed be. Let us join in spirit of life. Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, set me free. Spirit of love, come to me, come to me. May I offer as a benediction some more from Walden by Henry David Thoreau. Live in each season as it passes. Breathe the air. Drink the drink, taste the fruit, and resign yourself to the influence of the earth.